You should be live in a couple of seconds.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Those of you that have tuned in, welcome to, I think it's week 16 of our live painting session. And this week, I'm going to work on a 24 by 24 canvas, a little bit bigger. Done a couple of those in the past. And I'm going to do a kind of a snow scene from the Cotswolds that I shot years and years ago. I've done several paintings. I did a couple over there. And the photo looks kind of boring. It looks kind of very dark. And I've given it some thought. And so what I'm going to be doing is improving upon it, much the same as you want to do whenever you work, whether you're working on site or whether you're working from your own photo reference. So I already have some marks up here from another painting I was going to do that I decided to abandon. And so you can see what I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate with this Tromboy pen, which is this water-soluble pen. I'm just going to indicate some shapes in here, kind of the shape of that tree, the movement of it. And it looks like it kind of, there's another little area here. There's some tree branches in there, which I'm not going to sketch. Then we're going to get kind of the top of that tree. It bumps over. Comes down, not quite the center, so probably more in this area. So what you can do when you get things like that is if you have a little water handy, just wipe it off. And that's your eraser. Then we're going to get this kind of thrust up in here of this branch, which I kind of like. And you have to analyze a little bit of what you're looking at. We have this great snowbank coming in right about from here. And it comes in kind of at this angle. The tree kind of works its way up from here. There is another snowbank behind it. And there's a wall behind that. And there's some other things. And then there's a little tree branch, which I kind of like coming off to the right of that. And I'm going to move some things around probably once I start in. The more or less what you might call the focal point of this is going to be this piece of architecture, this great old kind of manor house back here. And it looks like the roof line is just a little bit above halfway. So it's going to sit about here. And we're going to come up with the angle of that. And the angle is about there. It's a chimney. Sits up in here. Really kind of nice, beautiful old manor house. I remember this. It was a morning walk that I took in January. And the bottom of the wall is going to sit in here. So this house, I've got this house all messed up here. I'm going to raise this whole thing and I'm going to come in, kind of lose some of this, just kind of fuzz it back. And we'll come in with this part, the top of the house, which is going to be about in here. And the chimney, I just had it too large is all. Not unusual. And then you're going to get the front and you get these four triangular kind of dormers coming out here. We're just indicating at this point in the bottom of it. And then we're going to pick up that wall. The wall is going to be about in here. I think I'm going to lower that wall a little bit too. And there's more wall back here. There is a tree in the background that looks almost like a pyramid. I don't like that shape. So it goes this way. I don't want it to go that way. I want it to feel like a tree. So I'm going to create a new kind of tree shape out of that. There's a bunch of dried trees without leaves, which are probably, to me, the most difficult, one of the more difficult things to paint. Back in here, foliage, a lot of kind of foliage in here, a little bit of a tree sticking out. This is a stream, by the way. And I'm just going to show you what we're going to take the stream, we're going to bring it down, and then I'm actually going to let a little bit of that stream sneak back behind. So the continuity, so we feel that the stream is going this way. All right, there's a reason for that. And I think I've got enough down to actually start my work. Because I move things around. Well, one of the things I want you to be aware of is when you first start, you're converting shapes to line. Now I'm going to take the line and convert it back to shapes. When I do that, it's more like what I see. It is easier to correct at that stage. If you want to spend, if you're going to do a very refined painting and you want to spend a long time working out the drawing, you can do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And many times I do that. But in this case, these are demonstration paintings. Because they're demonstration, we've got to work a little bit more of an abbreviated fashion. So the reason I'm telling you that is I want you to be aware that, and I took Naples yellow and white, by the way, and a little bit. I want to rub it down. I don't want to put it down very thick at this point. The reason being is I'm going to come over it with some tree branches. If I have it too thick, I'm really going to put myself into a bind. So right now, we're just kind of rubbing it down, so to speak, scumbling a little bit. So I take more of the white, more of the Naples yellow. I'll tell you the reason I want the yellow, because a lot of people have commented that I don't like blue skies. That's not true. The reason I'm using the yellow is because the shadows in the snow is going to be quite blue. And that would be influenced. And I want to get the sky reflected in the water. And I kind of see a little bit of a difference from the blue violet shadow to the water. So this color is also going to be in here, just so you know. So there's a reason I'm not just doing that just because I love the yellow sky, which I do. But that isn't the reason. So we're taking this little gesso brush, and I'm using it for expediency because it's very quick and I get a lot covered quickly. Now I can actually see if I rub enough, I can actually see my pen lines underneath. I don't want it, but in case you're afraid of losing your drawing, unless you're painting thick, literally you can use it. Now what I'm going to want to do is have the sky. Let's get a color in there real quick. This has a little more yellow in it. Watch. I just don't like to end up with the same color everywhere. So you're wondering why I did that? That's the reason. I have to go off to the right side. If I'm doing a 2 or 3 day painting on this, where I'm coming back to it several times, I can paint a little thicker because I can let this set up and dry a little bit. But because I'm working in basically a 90-minute session, I know I'm going to have to come back into this soon, within that 90-minute period. If your strokes, one of the things you might be aware of, you may take note of, is whether I'm rubbing or whether I'm painting, I'm never going like you would if you painted a wall. So I move my brush in many directions. So if strokes do show up, they don't dominate in any one direction. And I'd rather paint a little, overlap a little into the tree than I would leave that background, unless the background's a perfect color, which this isn't. This just happened to be a piece of canvas that I toned a while ago. And I'm working on canvas today, not hardboard. A lot of people usually ask that. So I am working on a stretched canvas. As long as I got that color, I am going to, whoops, got a little, I mixed a little, we're going to put a little bit of it in here where the screen sits, just so I get a placement. As long as I've got the color, use it. We're going to, and I said I wanted to bring a little bit, you don't see it here, but the stream, by the way, I'm going to tell you the name of this, you guys, those of you that are Wind and the Willows fan, Mr. Toad, this is literally the river windrush from Mr. Toad, and the Wind and the Willows, I think is the name of the book, and it was written about this area, the Cotswolds, and
So
in Europe.
Chuck Todd had a question. Do you think value and complementary color contrast using the Naples yellow in relation to what you'll do in the shadows?
Yes, to answer your question, that's part of my thinking. And the reason I wanted this color is because I want this being the stream, the river, to stand out against the snow. And it physically does with value. It also does a little with color. I do see, as I look at this color in the shadow, which is a little bit of a blue, gray, violet, and I look directly above it at the stream, or the river, I keep saying stream, that does feel slightly yellow. So I am using what I see. I'm not completely inventing, but maybe I'm pushing it a little bit more than it's showing. But they are, as you stated, they are near complements. So I'm going to mix up that near complement right now. There's the ultramarine blue, and there's the alizarin crimson, which gives me a violet. It's way too red. More blue into it. Now I'm going to bring the white in to bring the value, the key up. And you can see it's way too violet. More blue. We're getting closer. It's a little too dark. And if the color is too strong, I don't know that is either. If the color, let's take a look for just for a second here. It's a little darker than I want. So I'm going to add some white. And I think I'm going to add, I have a little titanium buff, which I don't always lay out, but I did lay it out today as a white that I can use to kind of a gray a color. So that's now it's a little bit on the dark side. The light side. So if my violets are too strong, instead of using an alizarin, I can use a cad red hue, which is it isn't quite as violet oriented. So I'm going to come in and start with this up in here. And I think that's about right. I'm always readjusting colors, which kind of adds vitality to your piece, as opposed to just mixing up one perfect color and staying with that. And I don't want this edge to be too neat. Now, well, that's crummy. That's because I pushed the brush, but that kind of stuff is beautiful if you ever want to create the feeling of foliage. One of the things that I want to mention is the snow as I look at it here. And if I were painting this on location, I would be doing the same thing. I would not be trying to get this, probably 800 divots, footsteps, divots, the way the snow is melted. I'm going to smooth it out. And we'll add a little bit of texture, but basically we're going to start out with it much simpler. And again, as I've said many, many times, start simple, build to complexity. And that's what we're doing. We're simplifying what's literally there. And it could be a beautiful snowdrift. It does not have to be. Just because it's all lumpy here doesn't mean that I have to make it lumpy in my painting. It's your painting, guys. Be true to what you see, but also use that thing that a lot of us like to call artistic license. And artistic licenses means you can take it two ways. One, you can say, if it's wrong, I've heard people say, well, that's artistic license. Well, true. It can be artistic license. But at the same time, artistic license is something that what you're doing is you're taking your knowledge and your experience from painting, and you're applying that to the image that you're painting, and hopefully improving upon it one way or another. There's a wonderful little path of light, which I'm going to try and get in here a little bit later. And that's where you see me kind of leaving this one area kind of vacant.
Bill Cook wants to know how you tone your canvas.
Tone my canvas. 2 ways, 3 ways. I either start with just 1 or 2 coats of gesso, acrylic gesso. Then I either put a wash on it, or I come over it with a coat. I take the white gesso and I add in kind of a couple of, and I usually work with kind of complementary colors. So I might work with blue and brown. That's probably the most common complementary color combination that I use. Sometimes I throw a little yellow into it. And I come in and I do 1 more coat with color. And I keep the color very neutral. I like neutral colors. I do know artists that work on super hot colors. A good friend of mine works on black. So there's not one way of doing this. It's basically the rule of painting in general. There's not one way of painting that's 100% correct, and every other approach is wrong. Because I try them all, but in any event, I get that down, and then that's my tone. Or after if I want to go with an oil prime, after I get a coat of acrylic down, I come in and literally coat it with oil, with an oil color. And if that's the case, you want to let it dry for a few days. You don't want to go right in on it. So that's one way. The other way is, once I have a coat of gesso down, sometimes I'll either come in with either an oil wash or an acrylic wash and have more of a wash. This is an opaque, but sometimes I come in with a wash. Now, if you ask me why I do those differently, I really can't answer you. I mean, I can. It's more or less how I feel at the time. I work a lot of different ways in terms of the way I prepare my surfaces. Hopefully that answers that question. So what we're doing is we're kind of simplifying kind of these gray violets. So it's much grayer back here than it is up close. This comes right through the tree, and that's that continuity. There is also a really beautiful little area back in here, and it's a hill, slight hill back behind all these walls, and it has that same kind of color. So we started pretty much with all of that. Next, I'm going to get this tree in, but we know that that's going to be nice and dark. So the next thing I want to do is kind of establish these values in the background. The reason I want to do that now is I want them to relate a little bit more to the sky. I can jump around, but what I always try and do when I talk to individuals about painting is I try and demonstrate what I think is the easiest way, not the only way, the easiest way. So I'm throwing a little more brown into it, maybe a little green or a little bit more blue. And if I look at my value structure right on my palette, I've got my value structure, meaning a little lighter, the shadow. Now I'm a little darker than the shadow, but a little lighter than it appears here. I can go lighter. You can put a little terp into that because it felt a little sticky. Okay, this, again, I use this brush a lot in the beginning. I could be using any one of these brushes, this rosemary filbert, but because of time, I'm using, and I remember I'm changing the shape of this tree. And if I push, I get those kind of interesting, almost foliage-looking edges. It almost has a little bit of a warmth to it back there. So I just barely dipped my brush into a little bit of the cad red there, and maybe a little bit of the raw sienna. Raw sienna is not as hot. I like that better. And we're going to get, so that we got a little bit of this tree shape, which it does feel like a tree now. It doesn't feel like a pyramid. There's a couple of them coming off to the side. I'm going to keep them all in that same kind of color value. As if I were to spend a long time, I might go back and start changing some of these colors and values back in here. Make him stronger, make him slightly different. But I want to start and keep the similarity there. This looks like it's about here. And then there's more foliage. And I just kind of barely let my brush touch and let it do the work for me. You've heard me say this several times. I feel if you feel like you're struggling too hard, then what's happening is you're literally not only making it harder on yourself, but you're probably making it too stiff, and you're adding a stiffness to it that is unnecessary. I added a little bit of red and green, and we're going to come in right in there a little bit darker, and I'm going to bring another little tree right in front here, just slightly darker. I see an indication of it. So I'm not trying to, and a little bit maybe over here. Again, if I have time at the end, I may go back and do all kinds of really careful stuff to these trees. But right here at the beginning, I want to keep it fresh, loose, understated. I like those three words, right? You can write those down. fresh, loose, and understated. Okay, a little darker. I went just a touch. Why? Because I'm making this a little bit of a tree come in front of these two trees. And it's because I see it. This is where you have to be able to look, as I refer to, begin to look into your photographs as opposed to at them. If you're on location, it's so much easier to see that this one thing is in front of another. But a lot of times cameras will really distort that view. There's a little bit of a tree behind it, so we're going to just barely let my brush touch down. And we're getting this interesting variation in here. This tree kind of goes behind the wall. There's some branches kind of interrupt. There's a lot of, this is the only way I know of doing this other than spending, 30 hours on this kind of stuff, is to really use your brush wisely. And in many instances, it comes out so much fresher. It takes away, you don't end up with that kind of over. And what we're doing is laying a few little strokes on top to make it feel like there's a tree in front of this tree, in front of that tree. And then I can see up here, if I just lay my brush down properly, I should get the effect that I'm after. Important thing about landscape, you're painting effects. You're not painting, when you paint a still life or a head, you're not painting effects. You're painting crisp, clear, solid form. But when you paint landscapes, with the exception of architecture, the form is more indicative. It is, as opposed to being, as firm and heavily form oriented as a, I'm just looking now, I'm thinking, a couple things I don't like. Yeah, I'll work it out. I want to bring this hill down a little bit lower, a little darker. Okay, there's some walls back there. The walls tend to get a little darker, and they are probably warmer. Even though this is a snow scene, it's a cold day, there's no bright sunlight in the painting. And one of the walls that I see is, I have to kind of figure it out here, is right here. I'm using brown for my warm, or asphaltum in this case. And that's the wall. And the wall is going to continue over here, and I got it messed up. That's okay. I'm going to put it right there. What I did is I mixed asphaltum or umber, whatever you want to call it, into the colors that I was using. So what it did is it darkened it and warmed it up just a touch, just a little bit. And then there's another wall back behind it. So we got the two walls there. And there's another wall right here behind this one. I can see it. It looks like it's almost architecture back in there. So we'll just put a shape back there, okay? I want that wall a little bit. I think I'm going to bring a few things down. I'm going to do a little changing as we move into this, because the wall, I didn't like the shape. I want the wall to be a little bit bolder. A little bit. Look at that asphaltum. That's way too strong. I didn't do that on purpose, but I'm glad I did it, because it shows you I'm going way too red too quickly. And it's going to continue right to there. Okay. Now I'm going to, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the house in. I'm going to start with the roof, which is not, the dormers are the darkest part of that house. The roof is very similar to that background tree. It's not, so the blue and the brown together. Keep your colors unified, harmonious, if you will. I'd add a little more white to that color. It felt a little too dark too quickly. And it sits about midpoint. So I've raised it a little bit, which is fine. So there's the roof line, and the roof comes down, and it goes behind those dormers. We want a crisper edge on that. And it actually lightens up a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit of that yellow color. We're going to come in and just kind of tickle it a little bit right in here. Okay. Leave it alone. I bumped this, I'm sorry. I'm going to take a little bit of a smaller brush. I think I'm going to take this little, let's take this, looks like a number 10 flat, and I'm going to mix up, very similar to this color, the front of this, which is kind of has a brownish quality, but it's not brown. We know it's brown because the way it looks next to the other colors up there. But it's about, well, that's a little too green, so maybe a little raw sienna into that. And it's a little dry, so I added a little bit of oil. Maybe a little lighter, not much. And we'll get the difference of the house to the tree. I'm going to make that a little bit warmer with a little bit more raw sienna. I think I added too much. We'll try it again. There we go. I like that better. And we're going to go up there. All right, the house over here. And as it goes behind, it actually slightly lightens up a little bit as it goes behind this tree. So we're just kind of rubbing it in. The paint is pretty thin. I'm not working with real thick paint. We're going to get the top of that dormer, same color, and the top of this dormer. And we'll clean them up, make them read a little bit better than they are. And last but not least, this one. And then there's windows in there. We'll get in a little bit. There's a big, beautiful bush or tree that's going to come up and encompass this area. Let's get the top of those in. Now, I'm going to actually switch down to a smaller brush at this point. I want to get, and that's the darkest part of the house. So I'm going to take the brown and the blue, which is going to give me a neutral. I don't want to go too cold. If anything, I'd rather probably have it be a little on the warm side. Add a little bit of medium. In this case, safflower oil. And let's try, and then we're going to do a little bit of careful manipulation because we're dealing with architecture. And with architecture, you want to be a little bit more accurate. Perspective counts. That's probably a little darker than I wanted. So I just went over it twice. Let's get that one in. And so what we're doing with each one of these, we are clarifying that dormer. Hope I'm not too dark. I don't think I am. Because I want to leave, I don't want it to go as dark as the tree. Top of it. Nice little flat. This is just a flat synthetic, truthfully. Any good flat will work. The reason I'm using a flat is because I want the edges to be crisp, relatively speaking. So we're going to get this dormer in. So you can see how all of a sudden, by adding just that dark roof line, what we're doing is we're clarifying the dormers. Okay. Last but not least, we'll hit right there, and it comes up to about in here. And it's kind of neat because I'm mixing that into a little bit of the paint below. So even though it's pretty dark, as it mixes in, it's giving me almost the value that I want. So there you have it. We've got those dormers. Let's take the chimney. Let's mix it back down so it's not as, I don't want the chimney as dark as this, slightly warm. And we're going to put it up here. It's a little bit darker than the roof line. And it lines up. Where does it line up? Right here. I have it in the right spot. That's always nice. Can't say that happens all the time when you're painting. Sometimes you put something in and it's in the wrong spot. And then you're going, oh, damn. But then you have to look at it and say, does it matter? Because if I were the architect, could I literally put that chimney in that spot? Maybe I could. So what the hell? No one, unless someone is with you when you paint on location, particularly on location, unless someone is with you, they don't know how accurate you are. You could add an extra window. God forbid, but you could add an extra window. No one cares. If it looks good, that's the important part, is that it feels and looks correct. That's really a crucial comment there. It's may sound a little, is that the painting itself is the thing that has to look correct. Not be correct, look correct. So like I said, if you want to add a window, if you want to add, it doesn't matter. As long as it appears when you're done that that's the way it should be. So I'm going to recorrect the roof line now. A little bit darker. The house is a focal point. It's one of the reasons I'm spending a little bit more time and accuracy in trying to get it correct. Looks like the roof actually comes up higher up in here. Okay, I don't want to dwell on it because I'm not going to get the thing done if I just sit there and work for the next 45 minutes on the house. Let's take that tree that's in front with the blue, the brown, the green mixed into that color, and maybe I'm going to throw a little Rossiana. Rossiana is a wonderful color because I can warm up a color a little bit without going too dark or without going too intense. So let's do that. I'm using really the whole body of the brush right now, and I'm being kind of bold, and I was being wishy-washy, so to speak, where I wasn't, I was afraid to put the brush down and just do some work. Okay, that's starting to work pretty good. Give it some nicer edges. Edge over here can go a little bit further. So go back, clean that wall up a little bit if I have to. Bring it over here. And there's trees. These are those kind of trees where I'm going to indicate them, and then maybe I'll put a few strong strokes in at the end for branches. But right now, this is a nice way to put loose kind of branch quality, where your paint's real wet and you're just literally kind of dragging it across and letting your brush create the feeling of all the loose. Okay, I don't want to go too far. Once again, I think I have probably, there's more light. Whoa, not that much. More light back in here. So as it goes behind that tree. So you can paint back and forth into it a few times. We're going to paint a little bit over here. I'm going to work this area, then we're going to work the tree, and then we're going to go back and refine. So I'm going to take, there's a tree that comes right in kind of this area, right in here. I call it a tree. It's really part of a bush, and it's actually slightly lighter than what's behind it. So I'm taking the green, the raw sienna, a little bit of white. That's pretty warm on my palette right now. You can kind of see, those of you guys you can see on the palette my values, the sky, the shadow, kind of 2 or 3 of the different trees, mixing a little bit of warmth back into this, and now I'm lightening. So I'm kind of, you can see I'm relating the colors immediately on my palette. I'm going to take a look. I want to go a little greener. Immediately on my palette, before I even put it down on the canvas. It's a nice way. Okay, we're going to, again, I'm going to use that yellow that's underneath, and it's forcing me to lighten it up, that yellow, because it's mixing. I see the little touches of warms, and this is where, honest to God, if you're spending enough time on this, you could have all kinds of fun. I could see coming in with interesting warms. I can see warms happening down in here. Look at that red. Take some raw sienna, move it into that, and right about in here. And we'll go back to that greener, darker color right here. Greener, darker. And we just kind of push it into that paint. And then hopefully in doing so, I'll get the right effect. Using the color that's underneath and the color that I'm applying on top, kind of gingerly right now. If I want it to go bolder, then I push. You see? Push it down. and you get it to go bolder. If you want it to be, you just kind of stroke it in gently. Now, if I get it in and it's too strong, I'll just go back because I have color underneath it and I can manipulate it to the point where you can get effects without sitting there. You don't have to sit there and every time match that perfect color. So there we go. And the texture of the paint that I'm allowing to show hopefully adds some of the character of that bush. So this kind of works its way over in here. A little darker here and there. And then we're going to start in on these darker because we want to get this whole thing set up so I have time to go back and worry about refining. There's a little bit of a reflection or a pull that happens right about there. And we're just going to leave it. And a little bit maybe there. And that's going to allow me to bring this bank up a little bit higher, which I'm going to do right now. It's not going to be, it looks every bit as dark as the tree. I'm going to not purposely not let it go quite that dark as my darkest dark. Keep enough cool in it so it doesn't jump out at us. And we're going to kind of bring this bank down. We're going to bring it down to about here. And there's a curvature to it. It curves this way. And it reflects. We get little tiny reflections. So I went back, I'm mixing so much of this undercolor into it. I went back and darkened it, but I can pull here and there little bits of reflective qualities back into it. And let's go, since it's coming closer, a little bit more blue and brown, and right up in here, it's going to go pretty. Then we get the erratic edge and the way it kind of works its way back. So it's not a crisp edge. It's not a, the snow is kind of falling over the embankment a little bit here and there. So we're going to kind of create that a little bit bigger up here. I'm using what I see. Okay, so you can see I've created a little bit of that effect. I think I might, see what I did here? I want a little bit of that river to show on that side. So I'm probably going to bring some yellow up so I can bring this over. Either that or I've got to bring it down here. I can go one of two ways in it. It gives me the option. And I don't have to make that decision immediately. Let's get a little bit more of the, so I don't have to worry about it later. Not that I could, but let's get it in there now. And even in the river, we get little, the river windrush. Whenever I've gone to the Cotswolds, I always feel like I call it Mr. Toadland, because the towns, Chipping Canon, all these towns are the towns that you may have read about. There was a little piece of river that sneaks its way through here, so that there's a clump. It's kind of neat. Let's put that in there right now, so I don't forget it. Okay, and it sits right there. Okay, leave it alone.
When you think about it, can you go over the palette?
Yeah, I go over the palette right now. It's exactly the same palette I use almost every week. I've added one additional color, and that's unbleached titanium, or sometimes called titanium buff. It is titanium white. It is Naples yellow light. It is yellow ochre. Yellow ochre, and I've mentioned it many times. That is, to me, one of the crucial colors. In this case, I have a cad red hue. I have alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, sap green, asphaltum or burnt umber, and finally, Rossiana. Rossiana is a color I've used more this year than almost any other time. I like it. It's working. And it's funny, when I used to work years ago in illustration, I literally used it a lot more. And then I quit using it when I moved over into oils and started doing more fine art. just recently I decided I was going to start using it again. I'm really happy I have. So what we're going to do now is we're going to lay tree, tree, then refine. And let me look where we're at. Okay. Tree, tree, and refine. That's why I'm staying with this brush right now. If I were doing a studio painting, I might be working with a little bit of a smaller brush from time to time, but I really appreciate the effects I can get with these larger brushes. I can get these wonderful effects with my rosemary flats also. It's just that I'm covering a lot of territory quickly, and in doing so, this little gesso brush is a magic kind of manipulator in terms of what goes on. So I want that continuity going straight across. Now let's get kind of a tree in here, tree in there. All this stuff that takes time, and I'll do the best I can to kind of show you what to do with that. So we want to go dark now and maybe a little warmer, particularly on the tree on the left. So I took the asphaltum. I'm also taking sap green, and I'm using the residue that I have in the brush, which is a little bit of everything. It's kind of a muted color, and so you can see it's quite a bit darker. I don't have enough of it mixed up, so I just remixed it, added it once again, and I'm adding a little bit of safflower oil to it. So we're going to kind of go up in here. We're going to brush, dry brush, and use the edge of this brush and not be really careful.
Bob Francis was asking, are you leaving the darkest foreground tree for later?
Yes, I am.
And why?
Because I always, when I do landscape, if I'm painting on location, if I'm painting in the studio, I almost always paint from back to front. And some people have referred to that as top to bottom, which generally it is. The closest things to you generally sit closer to the bottom. But I learned this years ago, and it works for me. May not work for you. It works for me. If I paint back to front, and generally your darker darks are sitting up close. So that's the reason. No other reason than that. So we got that tree, and there's a really neat, I don't know if I can pull it off here, but let's take this little, let's pull a stroke up. Okay. So we got that. There's a lot of brush. So I want my paint to be kind of dry at this point, where it's kind of skips and skims, and it creates the illusion of those branches. And there's way in the background. If I go back to my yellow and white and mix a little titanium buff with it, with the color I already have mixed in that brush, with the color, and I go really lightly before, I should have done it before I did that tree, truthfully. So I added a little bit more white and a little bit more Naples yellow. I'm going to add a hint of red to that. And we're going to paint brush trees that are kind of more like, we almost don't see them. They're so far in the distance. And we let the brush do the work for us. So you can kind of see it's starting. That's the value is absolutely correct, by the way. And I won't say that about my stuff, but I'm pretty happy with that. I got the right value in there. And then there's wispy trees. They come right up from here. And this is why, if you have that paint underneath, it can work for you. And what we're doing is painting these almost like they're fogged back. It's actually working pretty well. If I go over to the group of trees on the right, I can add a little bit more warm to it. And in this case, what I mean by warm is raw sienna. And they sit right up in here, right kind of near the chimney. So we're just kind of, I'm going to go, I want it warmer. So more raw sienna. Let's try it again, because these trees are a little bit closer. And then there's some stronger darks in them, which we'll add. I'm just not doing it right now. Whoops. Geez, grab some CAD red light. Didn't mean to grab that much. But I'm going to try it. A little bit of, so we get some variation. It's not one flat color. I can go down too. A little bit over here. A little bit up in here. Okay, let's not. I'm gonna use this again. I'm gonna get the big tree in. Then we'll have our basic shapes in. Once I get that big, I just don't have the light in on the snow yet. But once I get this big tree in, so again, green, a lot of it, and my umber, and maybe I'm gonna throw a little blue into it. Blue is green, is gonna add a little bit of green to it. Anyway, this is really almost as dark as I can go right here. A little bit more asphaltum. I want it, look at that. That's pretty bold. Okay, where does this come? Right to here. That's where I begin to see the trees, these branches start, and they're wispy. They kind of come up this way. So I'm using a real light touch, and we'll go like that and get that tree in there. Kill the river at that point. More brown, more blue, more green. More blue, more green, because I can see it's staying a little on the warm side. And we're going to just rub this paint around in here. I don't want to go, still got to put the lights in there, so I don't want to worry about getting too much refinement in that area right now. I'm going to step back a little bit and start to work. Okay, let's get all this kind of nice, simple dark in. I want nice marks. Good painting. All good painting is really a choreography of beautiful marks with the appropriate value and color. And I believe that is even more so in landscape work. It's true in all forms of painting. But in landscape work, because you're still trying to depict a specific character to your subject. It's not like just abstract where you just put marks down that are kind of fun and they don't have to have any bearing to a specific subject. At least not objective abstraction. I don't mean all abstraction. Now, overlapping. Well, really neat. And I want it to kind of come out and overlap a little bit more. Now I'm painting on really, really wet paint there. So I've really got to I can't press too hard, because if I do, I just literally push the paint right into the paint, kind of end up with mud. See. See, hint of warmth up in here too. So I just picked up a little of the cat red light in my brush when I did that. Glad I put that sky in there, because I don't want to have to take a lot of time right now and do a lot of sky holes. I know I'm going to have to do some, but I don't want to overburden myself with them. So if I could have kind of some of that sky already in there, which I already do, and scuff over it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to throw some raw sienna right in there. Just I see that color. The sky is kind of overpowering, and it's kind of fuzzing out these edges. Too much light up here. It's not a hard thing to do. You just kind of take your brush and touch it around a little bit, be kind of delicate with it. Nothing else. I really want nice marks on this painting when I'm done. Obviously, I want to get the right value and pretty much the appropriate color, but definitely I want the marks themselves to have meaning and have character and not just be clumsy. So I mix up a new dark. I felt like I was getting a lot of other colors starting to infiltrate into this. And we want these couple of nice dark shapes in here. A little piece of foliage sneaking out here and a bigger one that comes down right about in that area and overlaps. Oh, I kind of like some of the thicknesses that I'm starting to get accidentally. And usually that's the best kind. When you work really hard to try and get something, sometimes it's very contrived and it appears that way. So it's always best if it happens naturally and you're not really over worrying it. Now there's another tree right here, and the what do you call it? The base of it comes from here, and it works its way up, right up in there. And I see, as I look at it, I see a lot more green in that tree. So down, I'm mixing a little of my green, and I brought a little bit. That's a little okay. I'm bringing a little bit of yellow ochre into that, and where does it go? It's about up to this level. So I'm gonna that's basically where we're gonna have it kind of fuzz away, and then we're just gonna get a nice dark tree, and then it comes down over the wall a little bit. A little bit of sneaking through.
So,
What? Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought there. I really would like to know if you could talk a little bit about how you choose photographs and subject and composition.
I choose photographs first on composition. Subject, yeah, subjects is important because there are certain subjects I enjoy, but even in those subjects, if I don't have a good compositional reference, or if I can't see the potential of a good that's the other thing. And I remember when I did the mooses a few weeks ago, the mooses. Oh man, I am the uneducated. When I did the moose a few weeks ago, I worked from 3 different, because I couldn't find a composition in one. So I look back at my reference a lot. And I mean a lot. I don't, sometimes, I mean, this photo I shot years ago and I've never done a painting of it. But I kept going back and seeing things. And then I started thinking about it more and I said, no, I see a way I can make this thing really kind of interesting. So, and a lot of it had to do with value manipulation and a little bit of color change. So a lot of it is, I mean, so much of it honestly is experience. God, I hate to use that because it just sounds like a terrible cop-out when you say, well, gotta write that off to experience. But it is, it's trial and error. You do things correctly a few times, and you do things, which is great, you learn from those, but a lot of times you try things and it doesn't work. I love, and I probably do more studies than I do paintings. I do studies, I did 2 last night. Not of this, of some other things, just some things that I thought might be interesting. I do them small. Sometimes I sell the studies, they go into galleries. And sometimes I just do them because I have some time to kill and I want to try something. So I'll try composition sometimes, literally in the study form. I think that's one of the best ways, honestly, of really coming up with what is going to make a good painting. And the more of those you have done, the more acquainted you are with what will make a good finished painting, and then we got to start thinking about scale. Literally, scale is important. How big? Certain things just require, I mean, they just look like they've got to be done large. Other pieces that are nice, but it doesn't feel big. And there's not a book on what makes a great big painting and what makes a great small painting. That is 100% experience. There's just no other way around it. And it goes back to that line that one of our teachers came up with, the academy. The way you get better at painting is to paint. You can take workshops, you can take classes, and what we're going to do when you take classes is we're going to show you what not to do and maybe how to do certain things. But just because you've seen how to do certain things doesn't, and you probably, most of you guys have experienced this. I know I certainly have. I used to watch Don Putman when I was a student, watch him work in class. And I went, that's great, man, I got to do that. Then I'd sit down and I couldn't do it, even though I had just watched someone do it and do it correctly. You know, several years later, I finally got the hang of some of that stuff. Okay, so we have the basis down in this painting. The basic forms and structure is down. I'm going to do a couple of things real quickly, and then we'll go in for what we call refinement. We've got just about 35 minutes to do any sort of refinement, which isn't bad. So I want to take this tone, because I moved some things around here. I want to take that color. No, it's a little too green. So I'm going to take some blue and alizarin, mix it back in with that green. And let's put that snow line in. And then I want to, as the snow, it's got light, but as it comes over into the shadow down the bank, it gets cool. So it comes down and it gets cool down in here, way down here. And a little bit of a bigger embankment. I can use this brush and keep it kind of, boy, there's a little bit of light that I just catching that there's a little bit of light that slivers on the top of that. Now, this comes over here, literally goes back behind these weeds, comes over here, back up in here, right about there. All right. And we get a few little things in here. Now, I mentioned before, and you notice I painted right through that. I mentioned before that I was probably going to have to move that river a little bit, the river Windrush. This is a little town called, so we want this to come over here, continue on over, and then pick up right about in here, and not just a sliver of it. This town that we stayed in here is called Burton on the Water. This was a little walk. You had these beautiful, one of the great things, I sound like a travel agent for some of these places, but one of the great things about this particular area is it's famous for people that like taking hikes and walks. And you can hike from one town to the other, trails and paths all over the place. It's just wonderful. It's a wonderful area. We decided to try it in the winter. We've done it in the summer, and we really lucked out because it was, I'm going to pick up a bigger brush here. I'm thinking it was warm, but not ridiculously warm. So I'm taking what I see, snow is water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually come in and we're going to let a little bit of that, I've got to be really wet with this paint because I'm laying it on very wet paint. But I've mixed up almost the same color I used in the water. And we're gonna come in. That's too much right there. So I'm just gonna take my finger and go, flip. That's better. A little bit back in here. A lot of interesting light back here. I don't know if you guys can, I see it. And it's paying attention to little things like this that a lot of people, when they paint, particularly from photographs, it's true from painting on location too. A lot of people don't look for things like this. These little, let's go in here. There's a lot of little weeds and foliage. I'll see if how much of that I can get in. I don't know how much I'm going to have time for. I may have to do some of that off camera. Let's get the other bank.
What brush are you using?
I'm using Rosemary Flats, and this is probably a number 6, and that's a number 10. And so what you're seeing a lot is I use that gesso brush just to get the lay-ins. I don't use it for refinement. It's not a good refinement tool, although you can get really some cool, almost feeling like accidental edges on things with it. But really, when it comes down to refinement, you really got to go down to your better brushes. So what I've done, I've deepened that color a little bit, and I've tried to kind of create the feeling of that. Now, the other thing I want to do is, with a bigger brush, I want to come back and hit a little bit of a light. Whoops. Just barely laying that brush down, by the way, you guys. So it feels like light kind of raking over the edge of that, which is what I'm after. I want this one nice big swoop of light right there, and a little bit more as it breaks, before it breaks down into shadow. There and there. So we're getting the illumination there. What I want to do at the end is make sure I've allowed enough time so I can go back into that house and add enough information on that so it feels complete. Okay. Oh, we can do all kinds. This is where this is where you can play with thick paint, thin paint, color variations, make like more shadows. I can see more shadow come down. It feels better. And every now and then maybe it skips and get a little shadow down there. Now, I'm going to take that gray violet that I've got. I'm going to test it because I want a variation. Right now, I told you that you start simple and you build towards complex. So trying to be a man of my word. We started simple. Now I'm building towards some of the other real subtle color variations that I do happen to see in that snow. And I see quite a bit up at the top. It tends to get darker a little bit as it comes forward. So I'm going to look how dark that is, but I'm not going to use that. I'm going to take that and I'm going to push that into the color that's already there. Same here. Same right here. The snow is not flat. It's not like a beautifully, what do you call it? Polished floor. It's got it'll always have a little movement in it. So we're starting to get some of that characteristic. Now, I want to get a little bit of that light, that yellow light, and rather than take time to clean that brush, I'm going to grab another brush here. I'll grab the, like a number 10 filbert, pick up kind of that white with a little of the unbleached titanium and the Naples yellow together. a little bit of the solvent-free gel, and I'm going to try. Boy, I see it gets really kind of beautifully, almost a beautiful warm gray violet. I just caught that right in here, wrong. So I'm mixing up a new, let's try that. That feels better. And it works its way over, and we just work it into the paint. Boy, I love that. That's the right color. Now I just got to make it work. And it kind of comes up here, works its way that way. Oh, it snuck some yellow into it by accident. I don't mind that. Okay. But it gets brighter. It's like the sun almost peeks through here, but doesn't quite. But up in here, it gets much brighter. So I can go back to the color I was using almost initially. This time I threw some terp into it. I'm throwing paint at this point. I don't know if you guys can see it. I took that color and mixed it back into that blue, and we're going to kind of get a little bit of interesting variation going on in here. This is the kind of stuff you can get into and go over it and over it and over it until you get kind of the look and the feel that you're after. I don't know that that's the look or the feel. Let's leave it alone. I don't mind that. Let's put it that way. I don't know that it's exactly what I want, but since I don't have the luxury right now to sit and worry about it. Okay.
So Laurel Miller had a question.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for people who are used to working from life, plein air, and life studies in this time when you can't go out places and can't paint nature or figures from life?
Well, if you're not going to paint from photographs, you got next best thing is still lifes. And still lifes are great. Still lifes are part of nature, too, if you think about it. Because you got paint a wheelbarrow in your backyard. Things like that. Get anything can become a great painting. I learned that more by looking at the work of the artist Wayne Thiebaud, who literally painted a pile of ties. I've got ties in my closet. I don't look at them as subject matter that I would want to paint. He did a gorgeous painting of a pile of ties. So, and I don't paint like him, but boy, what a beautiful, beautiful painting. There is no subject. You can always paint. Just because you like painting it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try other things. I'm going to tell you a line that I use with one of my classes. And at the end of the semester, I say this all the time. So you like painting landscapes, okay? Practice painting still lifes and figures. So you love figurative work. Practice painting still lifes and landscapes. Practice what you don't like. It will turn you into a better artist. You will learn things from it. Paint an automobile. All these things. Everything, there's a culmination of learning, and it's those abilities. It's all those abilities that kind of come together and make you an interesting artist. I mean, I've learned more about, I think landscape painting, for example, a great way to think about landscape painting is abstraction. Because what you're painting, literally, again, these are lines that I've used in classes, but all painting is abstraction. You just don't think it is. It's an abstraction is an organization of paint marks, which is what landscape painting is. Which the difference is, you control them in such a way to make people believe it's a landscape, as opposed to, say, an abstract artist who is more interested in maybe in the design and the what would you say? Let's see, besides the design and the feeling of paint. The feeling of paint may become more, now that's become more important with me. Then you get an artist like a Nikolai Fechin, who has wonderfully been able to work the two together, both the feeling of abstract paint and the feeling of realism. And so paint quality, I mean, you learn from the best in the past particularly. And I've learned from someone like Fechin a lot, and he's influenced a lot of my more recent work where I want more of that character of paint quality. So if you guys recall, a long time ago, seems like a long time ago, it's been 16 weeks. So I gave a talk about intent. And I can't stress that enough. Intent. By intent, I mean, know what you want your painting to feel like when it's done. If you want the feeling of paint, then paint with it. If you want to work with outrageously intense color, make that part of your goal. If you want to work with a very limited palette and muted painting, more like a tonalist, then approach it with that. Approach it with that in mind, and don't let go of that concept. One of the things that happens quite often is people let go of their initial intent because something starts to happen. They see something and they go, "Oh, I kind of like that," and immediately you kind of abandon the reason you started the painting in the first place. I see that a lot. I've experienced that myself, so that's why I'm bringing that up. Usually, you guys have some of your better teachers. The reason they're good at being able to convey that is they've made those mistakes. We've made those mistakes, and through those, we can kind of give you a little bit of insight into shortcuts you might take, so you don't. Hopefully, it's like teaching your kids anything. You don't want your kids to make the same mistakes that you make, although they're gonna, and they'll probably come up with new ones. But one of the things that you can do is keep that in mind, keep that intent. What is your intent? I definitely have my intent in this painting, and I have to move a little bit. I've got to move to my liner and put some thin strokes in before I go in and refine the house. Some of the stuff are linear strokes. There is a branch, which I like quite a bit, coming out right there. A few little branches. I'm going to muff that brush up so it's got an edge like that on it.
This line said abstraction is an organization of paint marks.
Say that again?
Abstraction is an organization of paint marks. Is that what you said?
Well, it's not that abstraction is. Abstraction is the paint marks without thinking of the paint and not the subject. All right. When you're depicting a subject, you're adding an additional concept into it, because you're not just making wonderful paint marks, but you're making wonderful paint marks that have a meaning beyond just the paint mark itself. Oh, I like that. What did I just say? I'm sorry if I'm blocking your view.
Oh, yeah.
Just had to be a little more careful with that stroke. So we're coming in. I don't want to be quite that dark, but I do want to come in with and really wet paint. A lot of terp, a lot of medium into this paint. And I want to come in with some linear strokes in here. Whoops. Not wet enough. It's still not wet enough, you see? Didn't go down. That's because the paint underneath is so very wet. That's better. It's kind of a soft gray brown that I have mixed up here. There, we got some over here, same thing. Whoops, God, that's too dark. Didn't mean for it to be. I'll fix it. I'll just come back over it a couple times. I'd rather have too light and have to darken it than go too dark and have to lighten it. It's getting there. It's a little darker than I wanted in some of those areas, but I've got to live with it because I'm running out of time, and I do want to have enough time to go into that. I want to put some of these strokes, some of the twigs. There's a beautiful twig right, and it comes up and overlaps. These are those payoff strokes that if you set yourself up properly with enough of the understructure that works, you can come in with these few little strokes and make it all make a little bit more sense. But if you don't have that understructure going on, I don't care what you do, it's not going to work. Boy, there's some great colors in there. I don't think I'm going to have time to get into them, but they're literally, see if I can put a little bit in there so show you what I mean. I grabbed some red, some ochre, some raw sienna, a little bit, probably more ochre. It's pretty dry paint, but let's put a little bit of that color nuance. I see some there. I see some in here. I see some here. Just a little, it gives a little bit of flavor. Also, I'm kind of taking my eye all over the place, and I see a beautiful, warm, lighter warm, right? It comes from here, but as it comes up and overlaps in here, it's more in that range. And as it comes up from right there. You got to be bold enough. Okay, I've got about 15 minutes. Just want to give myself enough time to get into that building a little bit so we create a little bit more refinement to it. Add the windows, things like that. Little bit of time. I bring up a little bit of time, and I truly have to keep mentioning this, that a little bit of time is relative, literally, because if this were a studio painting, I'd probably work on this for about 3 or 4 days. Not 8 hours a day, but I'd work for a few hours, then leave it alone, work on something else, go back and work a few more hours, leave it alone, work on something else. Really important. Like I said, this is a giant study. And literally, that's how I look at these. They're fun. They force me because I'm working with large brushes and I'm having to make instantaneous decisions. They're teaching me. So I'm thanking you guys because you guys are allowing me to play and teach. Not just maybe you, but me. You know, I hope the more I do this, the better I get with this little liner and the way I make little marks.
Bill Cook was saying when you work in the tonal changes, I notice you don't vary them much more than about 10% or so, and then make minor color changes too.
And from the reference, is that what you're referring to? If you're referring from the reference, you're right. And I would say that's true with the exception of the moose painting I did a few weeks ago. I changed it a lot. And I'll do that if I'm really going to do a change, super major change in color. A lot of times I'll do a study because the study will tell me whether that's going to work or not. And I won't worry in a study about what I'm doing now, all this stuff. This is refinement. Studies aren't about refinement. And a lot of artists, I find, like the studies better than the finishes for that particular reason. And like somebody once said, studies show more of the artist's hand and not where the artist is disguising, say, his hand. But more impressionistic type works generally allow the artist's hand to become a little bit more of a dominant player in the, I'm using these because I think some of them add a little dimension and character. What I've been painting a lot lately, and I've started to really learn more about how to do them, is palm trees. And I find it's the way you use your brush more than it is anything. So a lot of these lines, you can be careful because you can go too far with these things. When I go too far, what I do is I go back and just wipe them out. If it starts to feel like I've drawn too much into something, then what I will do is I will literally go in and smear it. Again, remember that line that I try and say a lot, it's only wrong if you leave it. That's what I mean by that. I've got to come over. I got to go all the way over here. So I'm going to be in front of you guys. I'm sorry, but it's the only way I'm going to get over to the left side of this painting. Otherwise, I leave it alone. And I do want to add some of these. This is really hard to reach over there. Oh, shit. I don't know if I can do it. Let's see if I can get some of these branches up here. I'm just going to have to move pretty quick and just not even look at my reference. Just kind of fake it. And oh, I love that branch right there. Where's it go? Goes right there. Start to pick up too much paint, so pick it up again. Don't like that. See, we're adding density. That's what this is. And all these little additional little branch strokes, some darker, some lighter, because it has to do with the distance and the thickness of the branch itself. So you don't want them all to feel like really, some of them. It's one of the nice things, truthfully, about painting on wet paint is you can push some of the stuff right back into the paint. And it's starting to feel good. Now in here, I could, if I look carefully, what do I got? Okay, got just a little over 5 minutes to get that, go back into the house. And I didn't get anywhere near what I wanted done up in here. Let me make a few more real quick, clumsy strokes here. Let's take one from here. Let's bring it up, bring it, overlap it. A lot of brush. A lot of times you can take that stuff right there, take this and just get a lot of the busyness. The paint's got to be wet enough. My paint wasn't just that, but you can get some of the, it's way too strong. When you get that, Sometimes it's good that I screw up because I can show you guys what to do. Go back with the sky color. Chop it down. There you got a branch.
I think you might have answered this already, but Laurel was asking if this series of paintings on Fridays has been good for you.
Good for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If it was murder and I hated it, I wouldn't do it. I kind of like the idea. I know I've mentioned this to you, a lot of you before. I also like the challenge of trying to do it. And I guarantee you some of them have come out better than others. I know, and I know the ones that I think are better. And I know the ones that I don't think aren't better. But we might disagree on that. But yeah, it does. I learn. Challenging it all, you always learn. A lot of you guys, if you would just give yourself a couple of hours and do something. Don't try and take it to a super finished stage. Try and make nice marks. Practice those marks, because that's what all painting is, just marks. I mean, sometimes they're linear marks, sometimes they're big, bold, thick marks, but they're all marks. So I could go in here with a lot of wet paint. I'm going to go right into that house in a second, just so you guys. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. We're going to put the windows in first. What do we got? Got just a little over 5 minutes. So I'm going to try and get the windows in. They're white. They're very similar to the blue shadow of the snow. So what we're going to do is with a flat brush, I'm just going to paint in.
I don't know if you can do it from
I can't.
here.
I can. I just do it bad. Nope, not light enough. I've done it twice and I still didn't get it the right value. Let's try this. Nope. More white, definitely, and more medium, because I think I'm mixing it right into the paint. I'm going to have to live with it. It's not what I want. Need a liner. And I need to put a little bit of right there, there. And I'm using my reference. And I can see there's a little bit of snow that sneaks down on the roof right in between some of these. I can see it as I really start to isolate down. Now, with the darks in the windows, a lot of wet paint. I'm going to use my little finger. I'm going to put my little fingernail down, and we're going to put 1, 2, 3. The easiest way, truthfully, is to go all the way down. I'll show you something. Go all the way down. And the roof line comes out in front. I can see it right now. Out in front, out in front. Right there, and right there. And then we take the white again, and we do the cross members in these windows. One there, one there, one there, one there. And that's the way you kind of, now, one of the things I did when I was doing that is I kind of destroyed a tree. Where's my brush here? Let's pick up that tree again, a little bit more green. And I can see there's some structural, there's some poles right here, or it might even be a tree, but it's right here. Sometimes little linear accents add a hell of a lot to these things. It might be architectural now that I look at it. It is architectural. And what this does, it kind of finishes off the house, which is what we're trying to do. Because really, we want the house to stand out, but I don't want it to knock people over. So I want to get this tree back in here, and any things that kind of, oh, I like that. It's a little too dark, but some growth right in front of that wall. And probably back in here too. Here it's lighter, I can see. It's very interesting as to how I'm telling you all this because you're all going to, as you look back into areas, and this is true if you're working on site, if you're working online, you rediscover things that you kind of looked over the first time because initially you're painting for the big picture. And as you go towards refinement, you worry more about little tiny things that kind of, and that's what pulls it off. That's your payoff. That kind of pulls the whole darn thing together at the end, is all this little fun payoff. But as I've said many times, if you do not lay out the initial underpainting, all this little stuff is just, it doesn't work. And it's mainly because you put it in there at the wrong time. So I always, I know when I wrote the Quick Studies book, I came up with a phrase that I actually like quite a bit. And I think that a lot about painting is learning to see things in the proper order. And one of the biggest mistakes is too many people see the detail initially, and they don't see the big picture. It's the big picture that makes the detail work. If you don't get that big picture going correctly, that detail is just going to kind of be it's like putting a lipstick on a pig, or as one of my teachers used to say, polishing a turd. It's the same thing. It's like you're putting the polish on without having the element is that you're putting it on. So you see all these wonderful little colors, but if you don't have the right place to put them, little shimmer on edges right in here, I see little. If you don't have the right place to put them, it doesn't matter because it makes no sense. It's like you can have a floating highlight, but if the highlight isn't sitting where it does the appropriate amount of good, then that highlight is just a wasted floating tone. Always try to find new ways to say the same thing, by the way. I think we all do that as instructors. We're trying to clarify our thoughts. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting a little bit of bright in here. And if I was smart, I would have done that before I put all the top strokes on. We want, one thing I do notice is as it goes over to here, it gets really bright. So if I want to, I can take more white and pile it on a little thicker as it comes over into this area. And then pick it back up over there. And that starts to work. Overall, the piece has come together okay. I see things that I would absolutely improve upon and that I would absolutely go further with. Like I will add, probably once we're offline, I'll probably take 15 minutes and add more in here, just so you know. So when I repost it, that's where I'll probably put most of my, I usually try and take another 15 because I haven't had a chance to look at these things and look at it from a distance, but I try not to take it to what I would consider like if I were doing a finished painting type stage. Not that paintings like this cannot be finished paintings. I don't mean to say that about my work or about anyone else's work. It's intent, and my intent was in this was to give the feeling of this big bold foreground moving into this. I don't like that area right there, but I can always adjust that. And I think we're just about over our, I don't want to overstay my welcome. Okay. I appreciate you guys even tuning in and spending, if you spend this long with us, this amount of time, because it's a lot. And I know everyone has other things they're doing, even though we're in a kind of a lockdown where you can't do as much as you might want to. Still, I actually do appreciate you guys that do tune in and actually watch and ask questions and hopefully learn something and also teach me something. I'm going to stand back from this. Get the hair. I'm going to, by the way, I'm going to let my hair grow until August. Mainly because I don't necessarily want to go to a barber right now. I know a lot of people are, but I've just figured, what the hell? I'm an old hippie at heart anyway, so I'll let my hair grow. And my son, has dreadlocks, thinks I have good dreadlocks, and I don't. So, with my wonderful rosemary filbert in my hand, I will thank you all once again. And also, let me put a shout out to the guys at the Academy that are helping us with this. You guys, Anna's sitting here trying to answer questions and doing the filming, but we also have 2 or 3 individuals from the Academy of Art that have jumped in and really helped us with this. And so I want to thank them, and then thank you all. And if it wasn't for you guys, I'd just be sitting here painting, talking to myself. So thanks a lot.
See if we can get in on that a little bit. Sorry for the shaky moves here, but they wanted to see the windows because they couldn't see what we were doing. So
Everything's a little sloppy, but now you can see.
So there you go. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Go have lunch.